Have fun. His email sneered, the casual cruelty a digital slap after detailing his affair with Jessica and the theft of our $25,000. My husband, David, clearly believed he was escaping to a sun-drenched, carefree life in San Diego, leaving me, Vanessa, supposedly ruined and weeping in Austin. He didn't realize he'd just walked into a perfectly laid trap, one where his own arrogance and my quiet, calculated preparation would soon begin to strip him of everything he thought he'd so cleverly won. In fact, that very afternoon. My name is Vanessa, and at 41, I thought I'd weathered most of life's storms with a certain resilience. The email arrived mid-afternoon, a stark white notification pinging on my laptop screen as I was helping Mrs. Anderson select a handcrafted leather wallet at the Willow Creek boutique. I'm leaving you. David's message began, devoid of any warmth. Moving to San Diego with my 22-year-old girlfriend, Jessica. And yes, I've already emptied our joint account, about $25,000. Have fun. The casual cruelty was breathtaking, yet my hands remained steady as I processed Mrs. Anderson's purchase. My voice didn't even waver. The only betrayal of the storm raging inside was a slight tightening around my eyes. He'd imagined me crumbling, a puddle of tears. He had no idea. The signs, after all, had been there for months, the late nights at the office that never quite correlated with his pay stubs, the sudden, secretive password changes on his phone, his newfound religious devotion to the gym, and an expensive wardrobe overhaul clearly meant to impress someone much younger. 3 months prior, a receipt for an intimate dinner for two at a pricey downtown restaurant, on a night he claimed to be swamped with a deadline, had been the final catalyst. That very evening, I'd quietly opened a separate checking and savings account at a different bank, methodically transferring my personal savings and the boutique's substantial earnings. The joint account he'd just gleefully plundered held just enough from my recent deposits to avoid arousing his suspicion. The rest was secure. David's follow-up email arrived moments later, dripping with smug condescension. Don't bother begging, Vanessa. Jessica and I leave for San Diego tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Jessica, the new intern from his marketing department, all wide eyes and sycophantic laughter at his tired jokes during the company's holiday party last December. I'd noticed her then, the way her hand lingered a little too long on his arm. She was young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to believe his tired lines about being misunderstood. I didn't dignify his email with a response. Instead, my fingers flew across my phone's keyboard, dialing Michael Evans, the sharp, no-nonsense attorney I'd consulted 2 months ago after discovering inexplicable charges for a boutique hotel on our joint credit card statement. Michael, it's Vanessa, I said, my voice calm and clear. He just made his move. A brief pause, then Michael's assured reply. The papers are ready, Vanessa. I can file them first thing in the morning. Do you want him served in San Diego? No rush on that, I replied. Let him savor his victory a little longer. My next call was to the credit card company. This is Vanessa Carter, I stated. I need to report several fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. I detailed the first-class airline tickets to San Diego and the lavish booking at the Ocean View Resort he'd made just hours before, all on our joint card. The customer service representative's professional tone couldn't quite mask a hint of satisfaction as she invalidated the charges and removed David as an authorized user. Tomorrow would be an interesting day for him and Jessica at Austin Bergstrom. It didn't take long. My phone began buzzing incessantly with a string of increasingly frantic texts and then irate voicemails from David. Vanessa, what the hell did you do? The airline won't honor our tickets. The Ocean View Resort just cancelled our reservation. Answer me, damn it! I silenced my phone and focused on arranging a new display of handcrafted jewelry in the Willow Creek boutique. Let him stew. Around noon, an unfamiliar number flashed on my screen. It was Susan, David's mother. Vanessa, dear. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a tone that always preceded a lecture. David told us everything, about how controlling you've become, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now, deliberately causing problems with his travel plans. This isn't like you. I put her on speaker, calmly polishing a silver locket. Susan, I began, my voice even. Did David happen to mention he emptied our joint bank account and then charged first-class tickets for himself and his girlfriend on our credit card before telling me he was leaving? A beat of silence. Well, she stammered, he said you left him no choice, that you've been cold and distant for months. I see, I replied. I have his emails, Susan. Would you like me to read you the one where he brags about taking our money, or perhaps the one where he mocks my age and suggests I'll be lonely? Or the one detailing his grand exit with Jessica? Another, longer pause. He did seem a bit cruel, she conceded. I told him the email was inappropriate. I knew my evidence was solid, far more compelling than David's self-serving narrative already spreading through his family. Later that afternoon, Michael Evans called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday morning at the Travis County Courthouse, Vanessa, he said, his voice brisk and efficient. Given his clear admission via email of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud for the San Diego trip, we're in a very strong position to get those funds frozen and an order for their return. He added, and by the way, his girlfriend Jessica's social media is proving to be a goldmine. She's been posting about their romantic adventure all day, including some rather unflattering comments about you. We'll be using those too. A grim smile touched my lips. David, in his arrogance, had never considered I'd be anything but a weeping mess. On Monday, I walked into the courthouse, calm and composed. David was already there, looking flustered in an outfit that screamed midlife crisis. Designer jeans at least a size too small, and a trendy blazer that looked utterly out of place on him. Jessica, her youth starkly apparent under the harsh fluorescent lights, fidgeted nervously on a bench outside the courtroom. Michael methodically presented our case, David's boastful emails, the documented credit card fraud, the carefully separated financials of the Willow Creek boutique, and the deed to my Austin home, clearly stating it was inherited property solely in my name. David's hastily hired lawyer, a young man who looked barely out of law school, stammered about rash decisions and accused me of being vindictive. Michael coolly countered, vindictive, counselor? Or prudent? My client simply protected her separate assets and documented her husband's illicit activities. The judge, a stern-faced woman, reviewed the evidence with a keen eye. The outcome was swift. All remaining marital assets were frozen, and David was ordered to return the $25,000 within 48 hours. The color drained from David's face as the judge delivered her ruling. But that money's mostly gone, he protested, his voice cracking. We spent it on things for the move, deposits. The judge cut him off, her tone icy. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, Mr. Carter. And this court takes a very dim view of spouses unilaterally draining joint accounts to fund extramarital excursions. Outside the courtroom, I overheard Jessica's panicked whisper to David. "What about San Diego? What are we going to do?" His mumbled, defeated response was lost as I walked away, the click of my heels echoing confidently on the marble floor. The following days were a flurry of desperate, ill-conceived maneuvers from David. He tried to claim he'd invested his own money into the Willow Creek boutique years ago, a laughable assertion easily disproven by my meticulous financial records, which showed every penny of startup capital came from my inheritance and personal savings. He even attempted to argue that the Austin house, my grandmother's legacy, should be considered marital property because he'd contributed to its upkeep by occasionally mowing the lawn. Michael Evans dismantled each claim with surgical precision. Jessica, meanwhile, quickly realized her romantic getaway with a supposedly wealthy, sophisticated older man had devolved into a financial nightmare. I heard through the grapevine, Austin can be a surprisingly small town, that she'd kicked David out of the cheap extended stay motel they'd been forced into after their San Diego plans imploded. He was apparently now sleeping on a lumpy sofa at a sympathetic and equally foolish friend's apartment, his grand plans crumbling around him as swiftly as his finances. His family, including his sister, Laura, began to see the full extent of his deceit. While David's life unraveled, the Willow Creek boutique thrived. News of my situation, as locals delicately termed it, had an unexpectedly positive effect on business. Women, many of whom shared knowing glances, came in specifically to show support, often leaving with more than they'd initially intended. My ex tried something similar. One customer confided while purchasing an expensive silk scarf. Men like that never expect us to be smarter. David's emails, meanwhile, continued to flood my inbox, their tone oscillating wildly between indignant rage, manipulative self-pity, and pathetic attempts at reconciliation. "You've ruined everything, Vanessa," one screamed. Another whined, "I never meant to hurt you this badly." "Can't we just talk about this?" I forwarded each one to Michael Evans without comment, adding them to the ever-growing file of David's self-incrimination. Through Laura, David's sister, who had called to offer a tentative, embarrassed apology for her initial judgment, I learned Jessica had officially moved on. Apparently, sharing a cramped, budget motel room with a broke, middle-aged man whose primary topic of conversation was how unfair his ex-wife wasn't the glamorous escape she'd envisioned. The final divorce hearing was an anticlimax. David appeared haggard and defeated, his ill-fitting designer clothes replaced by a rumpled suit that looked like it had seen better decades. Jessica was notably absent. Michael presented our meticulously documented case for the division of assets, or rather, the lack thereof that belonged to David. The judge swiftly finalized the divorce, awarding me my house, my business, and my separate financial accounts. David was left with his personal belongings and a car worth less than the outstanding loan. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courtroom. "No, David," I replied calmly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me, too." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, the contrast between our lives couldn't have been more pronounced. At 47, David had been forced to move back into his childhood bedroom in his parents' modest house in a sleepy suburb outside Dallas, a humiliating come-down for a man who'd once boasted of his sophisticated Austin lifestyle. His attempts to re-enter the marketing field were met with lukewarm responses, his reputation having preceded him. Rumor had it he'd even tried online dating, but women his age were wary, and younger women, perhaps alerted by Jessica's cautionary tales, steered clear. Meanwhile, The Willow Creek boutique was flourishing. I'd just signed the lease for a second location in the trendy South Congress district, and our newly launched e-commerce site was gaining national traction, orders pouring in from across the country. I hired 3 new staff members to manage the increased workload. One afternoon, Jessica Hayes walked into my original boutique. She looked younger, somehow, but also more world-weary. "Vanessa," she began hesitantly, clutching her purse. I owe you an apology. I was naive, and I believed everything David told me about you, about how you were holding him back." I simply nodded, continuing to arrange a display of new arrivals. "He tried the same lines on me when things got tough financially," she admitted, a wry twist to her lips. "It turns out big plans don't pay the rent." His mother, Susan, called occasionally, her tone now contrite, lamenting David's string of bad decisions, a failed attempt at day trading, a brief, disastrous involvement in a multi-level marketing scheme. Each desperate gamble to recapture his former glory only dug him deeper into a financial and emotional hole. His sister Laura, during an awkward encounter at a mutual acquaintance's party, confessed her shame at ever having doubted me. 2 years after David's life-altering email, I stood on a stage addressing the Austin Women in Business Conference. The topic wasn't my divorce, but building and protecting your brand, strategies for sustainable success. The Willow Creek boutique, now a chain of 4 thriving stores across Texas, had become a recognized name, and my story, the one of resilience and shrewd planning, had transformed from local gossip into an inspiring case study. During the question and answer, a young woman asked, "My husband says I'm being paranoid for wanting to keep my startup finances separate. He says marriage means sharing everything." I smiled. "My ex-husband said something very similar," I replied, "right up until he tried to claim half of my business after announcing he was leaving me for a younger woman and emptying our joint account. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia, it's prudence." The applause was warm and genuine. David, from what I occasionally heard, had finally moved out of his parents' house into a small, rented room above a garage. He was working a low-level administrative job, a far cry from his previous managerial position. His online dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though the photos were clearly several years out of date. Jessica, ironically, had become a semi-regular customer at my SoCo boutique. She'd finished her degree and started a small social media consulting business. "You really inspired me, Vanessa," she told me once, "seeing how you built something real and lasting instead of just falling for empty promises." Even Susan Carter, David's mother, reached out one last time. It wasn't to plead David's case, but to thank me. "You taught our family an important, if painful, lesson, Vanessa," she said, her voice heavy with regret, "about enabling bad behavior and making excuses. David is still David, but we're no longer defending the indefensible. 5 years to the month after David's cruel email had attempted to shatter my world, I stood at the grand opening of the Willow Creek Boutique's flagship store, a beautifully renovated historic building in downtown Austin. The little shop he'd so dismissively sneered at was now the cornerstone of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. His attempt to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model while plundering what I'd built, had instead become the inadvertent catalyst for my greatest success. I still kept a printed copy of that infamous email, not framed in my office as some macabre trophy, but tucked away in a file labeled motivation. It wasn't a reminder of pain, but of how far I'd come, a testament to the strength I hadn't fully known I possessed until tested. Occasionally, a forwarded email from an old, shared account would find its way to me. David, still trying to rewrite history, still lamenting the life he could have had, never quite grasping that he hadn't lost it in the divorce. He'd actively thrown it away with his arrogance and deceit. His life was a series of could-have-beens, while mine was a testament to what was: a thriving business, a respected position in the community, and a deep, unshakable sense of self-worth. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had intended his email to be an ending, a final, devastating blow. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans into unstoppable motion, paving the way for a beginning far more fulfilling than the life he'd tried to dictate for me. My success was, indeed, the best revenge, though by then, revenge was the furthest thing from my mind. I was too busy living well. My story isn't just about my marriage ending. I hope it serves as a powerful testament to the crucial importance of foresight and financial independence. The key takeaway I learned is that preparation is paramount. Don't wait for a crisis to understand your financial standing or legal rights. Like I did, acting on my intuition when those red flags appeared, it's vital to trust your gut and take proactive steps. My meticulous record-keeping and the decision to maintain separate finances weren't acts of distrust then, but of prudent self-preservation, proving that financial autonomy is a cornerstone of personal strength, especially for us, women. In today's world, this means understanding marital property laws in your state, perhaps considering a prenuptial agreement, and always maintaining at least one financial account solely in your name. It's about building your own career and passions, not just for financial security, but for your own identity and fulfillment. My calm, strategic response, rather than emotional reactivity, highlights the power of a clear head in a crisis. Ultimately, the incredible success of the Willow Creek Boutique became the most eloquent response to David's betrayal. Does my journey resonate with you? Have you faced a situation where preparedness made all the difference, or wished you'd been more prepared? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If my story inspired you, please like and share it. And don't forget to subscribe or follow for more empowering content. Remember, you deserve respect and happiness. Build the future you envision on your own terms.